The council member Napier has requested that a discussion item regarding the city clerk recruitment be added to the agenda for further discussion. City Manager Megan, would you like to comment on this at all?
I think I've reported, we've received multiple applications. We've got some really strong applications for the position. My recommendation is that we set up interviews starting next week. If the ad hoc would like to be, on those interviews, I think that's great. But I would like to move it forward to get some hired. I have reached out to temp agencies as well to start the process. It's a little bit more of an involved process, drafting the agreements and everything to find temporary services, but we are looking at that as well. But I do have at least one applicant that is very, very well qualified to do the position.
Where is it currently advertised?
It is advertised on our website, it's advertised on Craigslist, and it is also we posted it around town. We shared it on Facebook, social media posts. But in fact, we didn't do a newspaper posting this time. It's North Coast Journal. We usually do North Coast Journal. It's our other posting. We didn't use Indeed this time. We did use Indeed for the finance manager position. Um, it was a very involved process that in the end ended up really taking a lot of time to manage. There's a whole dashboard you have to manage. And what we found is although we were seeing a lot of applicants, they weren't necessarily applicants for our position. And so we were doing a lot of extra work trying to track people down that actually weren't interested in our jobs. And so it just seemed to be a resource, I think, for like a larger, maybe draw that you're looking for. But for this position, it just didn't seem as applicable.
A couple of comments. And I think this again reflects some of the challenges that council has in having their agenda items on. What I requested is that we have the city clerk position be added for discussion, direction, and or action. I think this, the recruitment discussion is, reflects something more confined and limited in its scope. And I think it's kind of necessary that we revisit uh, what we had discussed through ad hoc and expectations versus the posting. I think, are you, we have this, because my first question is the city of Blue Lake clerk position as we have with the job duties and descriptions. Um, and then you have a job opportunity, and those are posted together, and that appears as one position.
No, one is a job announcement. It's like a one pager that
Uh-huh.
says if you're interested in here's kind of a synopsis of the position. If you're interested, here's where you can find the full application, the full job description. The other is the full job description that has all of the duties assigned. So one is more just an attention getter. If you're interested, here's where to go to seek further information.
Well, the the motion was very different, and it had requested that we advertise simultaneously, one for what is anticipated to be a part-time or full-time staff clerk, and we discussed about it would be beneficial to, look at those duties and, kind of in a large scope and try to see what we might want that to look like as far as duties go. But the other one distinctly, and that was what was approved in early February, was for you to be able to get assistance immediately. And that was the $30 an hour, and I think it was up to 20 hours a month.
So you guys had a motion at the last meeting. Councilmember Scafani made the motion finally to move forward with recruitment, move it forward as either a contract, part-time, could move up to a full-time, but to start the recruitment to see if we could gain any interest. And that's what we've released based upon the job description, the projected wage, and the advertisement. I presented all of that. So I think you had differing directives from the ad hoc to what actually the council as a whole motioned. And so that's where I'm starting to feel like I'm being pulled in two different directions.
Well, I'm sorry for the confusion on that. The motion, and I think this is where we need to make a motion to reconsider. The actual motion that we had on March 11th, from Councilmember Scafani reads, I would move that we authorize the city manager to begin recruitment immediately for a part-time to full-time city clerk position, leaving that status open, and to reflect whatever fine-tuning of the job description that the ad hoc committee would do. And that is part of what had been sent to you in the emails prior to this agenda being set. And when I saw that that had been posted, and simultaneously to be looking into staff agencies to find somebody to come in on a temporary basis and sounds like help Mandy with these backlog duties. So maybe not the best motion, and perhaps we should do a motion to consider that we could pull that and then come forward. I have two new motions so that we're really clear that one is for a part-time or full-time city clerk position, and the other is to please get help immediately.
Well, the motion is exactly what she read. And,
Yeah, but the result is not what the motion expected.
I mean, what did you want me to do? I posted the job. I mean, I don't know what the difference is.
well, you posted a job that was restricted to 20 hours a month.
It says that it's part-time to go up to full-time. It has the options. It has the contract, part-time, giving the flexibility to see what kind of interest we gauge from it. That is what I released.
And then you've already indicated that you have reached out to temporary personnel agencies that, and that process can take a little bit of time to come up with agreements and exactly
But
financing.
there's a whole legal process. You have to go through those agencies, the whole contract agreements and everything that has to.
But to be clear, you are pursuing that with the personnel agencies right now.
Yes, for basically someone to pay me.
Okay.
So, but like I said, I have 5 applicants right now. I mean, I think that's really good. And I'd be happy for you guys to look at them and see if there's some people you'd like to interview. I mean, I think the end result is right. We're trying to get a city clerk. So I'm not really sure
Well,
where we're off track.
okay, well, I think where we're off track is that the ad hoc wasn't involved before that job description went out. And
It
there
was
are
the
please
same
let me
job description
finish.
I gave to you guys.
Right, which we already had brought up. We spoke at length at the last meeting on the reporting of the city clerk. And you still clearly have in there that it is hired by the city manager. You have them
It is.
doing administrative duties. And I think that this is something we still need to hammer out.
Add in other duties as assigned, which would be the other administrative duties. I changed that to the job description.
No, but literally the line as other duties as assigned, which is on, which is great. But in the duties and responsibilities under administrative direction, it should be under the city council. You've read this in the email. The same document, the description of city clerk duties, it reads the city clerk is hired by the city manager and appointed by the city council.
Right.
And I think it should read is appointed by the city council. The wage scale for the city clerk also needs to be determined, which you have. And the application on the city website likely needs to be pulled and revised before any reposting. Excuse me. I'm not in your way.
I've asked him to be quiet.
Yeah. And
Joke with me and that.
okay, and I appreciate that, but I think at this point, this has continued. This has happened at every meeting. This has been continuous. And I think perhaps maybe if you need to leave the dais, please do and make your comments outside. Again, the interruptions, the heck,
Arcs, everything that we do, we're gonna do anything ever, which everything we do, we need to go back and
this,
let's reassess everything.
yeah.
It's just amazing.
I motion to eject him from this meeting.
Absolutely.
I might not get a second, but
We have a motion. Do we have a second to reject for fire meetings?
I would like to ask Chris to really try to see. No, I don't think we can.
actually,
I'd like to ask you to try to be more patient and to try not to speak like somebody else is speaking. I know it's hard, but I think that
It's just recent. I think we're gonna all come together here and just calm down. It's 5 seconds and we'll come back and
I have a question for Kat. How many hours have you invested in this project?
all right, let's come back.
okay.
How many hours?
Oh, I have
Who wants to give it to you? That's
just so you know, I have well over 100 hours, and have worked on this actually over a couple of months and looking not just at, oh, we need a city clerk, so let's have a city clerk. I've looked from the California state code for cities. I've looked at, League of Cities. I looked at many different cities. This isn't arbitrary in what we're proposing. And through these, I have worked with the ad hoc partner. I know, and I apologize, Michelle, because you have a really nice, fair, delicate touch, and you afford a lot of grace. And I know that tonight I have been pretty much tapped out on that because the amount of work that went in and to see a product that was really no different than what you had presented to ad hoc in the beginning and the work that went into it. And essentially the only change was that you made it 20 hours. So I felt like I'm really concerned. I am concerned that the expectation that by just posting on an obscure city website and then a little mention a few days later from Craigslist for it, that isn't at all the expectation that ad hoc had as far as where we outreach. We aren't expecting national outreach or even statewide, but regional is reasonable. To have something in the North Coast Journal is reasonable. And if you're unable to do Indeed, then perhaps find someone, maybe Dan, that could and could do it reasonably. But I think that it works against the city's best interest to have an extremely limited advertising in an extremely limited period of time. And the exceptions I have are that what was posted, most of it hit the essence of what we're wanting to do, but there were some major differences. And when I did try to address those with you, you're seeing that as, and I appreciate you can't take a directive from one council person. So at the same time, and in this motion, it's to work with ad hoc, and Michelle had been ceasing.
Motion. Councilmember Stefani's motion was for me to start recruiting for this position, and then we could work through any issues, but to get it out. I mean, I've been asking for this to be advertised since December, and it's March. It's going into April. I've got 5 solid applications sitting there. Recruitment is work. There's interest. Like I'm not sure what the problem with moving forward is. I need a city clerk. Like I can't keep doing all of this work.
And we approved in February that
I
you
don't
get
need just a
assistance.
transcriber. It's
Well, you
more than
chose,
that.
no, actually what you have told us is that is what you need, is someone to come in and that is, because staff, the rest of the city clerk duties are distributed amongst the staff.
Absolutely.
And
The
that
administrative
all you
services.
needed was somebody to do the transcriptions of the meetings and do a little bit of the agenda prep and then a few staff hours.
It's a long time to do all of
That's
that.
not a city clerk, and we've approved assistance for that. That's something that doesn't
So
take
I
time.
would ask that you look at the job description and tell me what in there is not looking at all the duties of the city clerk, the elections, legislative, record keeping, management,
That
access
you
to
have
the
that
public.
coupled with limited scope,
No,
that a contract employee,
that's an option to provide the service
It-
because we can't find
those
someone to do
two,
the job.
okay, those two read very unclear. They read as if they're supportive documents to each other. One is the duties and responsibilities. The other talks about the amount of time that might actually occur with that. And then additionally, applications, as I've shared with you, have laws that are or have questions on there that are prohibited by the state of California. You cannot ask the prospective employee what their final salary was.
You can ask it, they don't have to provide it.
You cannot
There's no
ask
right
it. You cannot ask that.
So I guess at this
That is
point,
on the
I would just
fair
ask the
interest
council
of the
to clarify what it is you want me to do. I need a city clerk. If you want to take this over, if through council, I don't know what the options are right now, but I feel like I've provided everything you've asked. I have job descriptions, I have wage scales, I have recruitment, I have applicants. I don't know what more I can do at this point.
I'm on the website right now. And it says a contract position for part-time.
Yes. I don't have a full-time position requires full benefits, that including medical health.
So what if hypothetically you get back together with the ad hoc and you guys refine this posting and then we repost? I mean, not what are we posting that we already have people on assignment?
I My thought about this is that we need to move forward. How can we move forward from where we are? How can we do those places on this? I feel very strongly still that the city clerk position needs to be something maybe different than what you are, and maybe I'm completely wrong because I don't have the experience. I understand that. I would like to explore options for the city clerk position. I can wait to do that, and I think that this position is perfectly has the potential to evolve into something that maybe looks closer to what Kat and I were envisioning. I'm not going to speak for her. My thought is, and my feeling is that we can move forward, continue to move forward. We've expressed our concerns, and we need to move forward with what is already happening now. That's my thought, without moving backwards, without taking anything away. Um, knowing that position feels to me like it could be so much more than what has happened to it. And I would like to, I have a lot of hope for this position. And so I would like to continue the discussion, like to explore the evolution of that position into something bigger for the for what's happening right now. There's not a lot we can do. It's already been out there, and you already have applicants for what has been out there. And so that's done. It's all done. And so at this point, I don't feel like that there's anything that we can really do to change.
Christopher, did you want to make a comment? I know you.
So I would like to make a comment. I think um, we do in fact have at least one that I know of very qualified applicant. Um, and um, so I'm in favor, even though this position is not at all what I envisioned. I mean, to 20 hours monthly. That's not at all what I had in mind. But the fact that we have somebody that is more qualified than we could have dreamed, who might come in at a very limited contract basis of 20 hours a month and do the job and help us out now and potentially be a resource should we morph the job into something else or whatever. Well, it doesn't even matter who. Nope. Sorry, it doesn't matter who the applicants are. If we have a qualified applicant that is ready to interview, that can help us now on a contract or even a basis, we can always expand that later.
Thank you. You guys mind if we open up the public for comment? Public, would you like to comment on this item?
City clerk is not an administrative clerk, and the city clerk is appointed by the council. There are laws, like Kat said, what a city clerk can and cannot be. She is not under your jurisdiction. She is a city clerk. She is her own job. She's her own office. And you keep saying, I'm going to do this with her. But she is her own job. So you can shake your head all you want, but you're not hearing what they're saying, that they want her to be. So you need to listen and quit shaking your head and think you're the boss of everything, because you're not. This is a separate, it's like equal to you. She is. She's as equal as you are in this city. She's not under you. She's not your employee. She is her own office. So you need to listen to what they're saying.
So I would like to clarify, I absolutely understand what a clerk is. And if you read the job description, the clerk's duties are delineated as being separate. There's legislative authorities that mandate what a clerk's role is. That is all built into the job description. The clerk is hired by me, it's appointed by the council. Our previous clerk job duties, job description included all the administrative side of it in order to make it a full-time position, which included water use, accounts receivable, answering phone. That is all under my purview. The clerk's functions themselves are delineated as separate duties outside of my purview. I absolutely understand that, and it's actually written in the job description that way. So the fact is that in the past, there was a whole administrative side of it that was very much under the purview of the city manager because there's not enough work for just a city clerk on a daily basis. And so in order to make that a full-time position, and you can ask Karen Nestler, you can ask anyone, their daily duties included going and getting the mail, answering the phones, doing the utility billing,
This
doing
is public
correspondence,
comment,
all of
please.
those
Public
duties.
comment, please.
So I'm getting these comments and I've received them multiple times. So I just want to clarify that I do actually understand the position.
Do we have anyone?
Great. Anyone else wish to comment? Julie, can you see on Zoom line?
You guys are being tough, so am I every night. So my lambs are saying hello. I think this has been a discussion we've had for quite a few years. Not many people have been along on it. Mandy, you've been there the whole time. You know, this has really gone up and down, up and down. We did reach this point though where we are ready to get a clerk and to get one at a higher capacity than we've had in the past. And I think that's really amazing. I agree that we do need to kind of maybe get somebody in there. If we've got the applicants now, let's get somebody in there, maybe a month to month basis or something. And if they're comfortable with the pay, I mean, we always want to treat people better than we would treat ourselves so they stick around. But if we have some really good applicants now, they're willing to step in, I think we should give it some thought and move forward with it in a way that the council's comfortable, that we can keep on with the process. Now, when I was looking for the application and stuff too, it was fairly difficult. I did my due diligence to make links very easily, share them as best I could on the internet. So I'm glad, maybe the process is the problem. I understand our council's frustration. Process has been a problem, but let's make an example of this one where we can kind of meet in the middle a little bit and just get moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Last call for public comment. Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council for.
Yeah, according to the League of California Cities, it's much more than elections, and city clerks can work within the fiscal and financial realm. That's the very essence and heart of a city clerk being involved in this manner is a separation of powers. And I guess I feel very strongly about that and what the reporting mechanism is and as expansive duties as possible with the city clerk, because we have a contract attorney, we don't have a treasurer, we have an accountant, but it's such a key role here. And I don't understand the resistance in this role when it actually can assist you, it can free you, it can, give you so much more time for other projects.
Please hire one. I'm
She's been asking.
not the roadblock. I need a city clerk. I
We
fully
have been
understand.
discussing this since December.
Yeah.
I've tried to get this onto the agenda. So the council has not been the roadblock whatsoever. And the issue that I have is you chose to use the job description and use a job opportunity that you had already decided to work for more fleshed out city clerk position. And it just doesn't read appropriately to what ad hoc had reflected. And if you had any question about it, you could have referred to those documents that were provided in the last council meeting.
It was
So
brought
I don't
to
want
the
to
council. They took action on it.
this, but
You are.
there's been so much time invested. There's such a critical need for a city clerk here, and it almost felt it's like it almost felt sorry, but it felt intentional to have this just boosted by ad hoc, despite the motion, and then when the issues were brought to your attention, it's already out there. It's too late. Just because you've done it wrong and it's out there doesn't mean that it should stay. I disagree with this idea that, well, it's already there. So
Councilor Behavior, I did what the council directed through motion. The ad hoc doesn't have the authority to direct staff. It came back to you. Ad hocs make a recommendation back to council. Council took action and directed me to post the position. You guys even had me make changes.
Parameters.
They're in there.
They're not. They're not.
They're
Not a
there.
part-time to full-time position.
We said
And you said-
consider also the contract. It was to consider the contract, the part-time up to a full-time, but just advertise it and see what we can get. That's what I've done.
I think that the motion, it was a confusing motion, I'm not gonna lie. But I think because of the confusion, we said, please follow up with the ad hoc committee to see if they can fill in the gaps in that motion. Anyway, so with that, you would like to give any staff number where?
I think we can clean it up if you want to. If you have a motion to reconsider. If put it forward, reconsideration, that motion, you can make a new motion directing the manager to follow the ad hoc recommendations referred to as issue one, which is to get the temporary assistance, and then to follow and to do another motion to direct the city manager to adhere to the ad hoc recommendations referred to as issue two, and so that it could go along those lines. And then there's a third motion requesting to please
Did you get all that, man?
down the please make comments.
Just asking if she's been able to get that now. I think that's a clue. A lot. It's not bad.
Next question for you. Yeah. Should the ad hoc committee is part of the reviewing and hiring process? Do you feel that these 5 applicants, are you willing to interview them and see if they can be, if they can fit the need that we have right?
Great question. I would be willing to see them as a first pool of applicants. It wouldn't be like this isn't in lieu of getting any other applicants of calling that. The second would be that we need to determine what that recruitment window will be for this. And the hiring is made on the recommendation of an ad hoc or full council. If I'm trying to determine what you mean by is hired by the city manager.
I
What
can
you
do the
determine?
hiring. If you look in the municipal code, it clearly states that the clerk is hired by the city manager and is appointed by the council. And that's because in the past, the city
That's-
clerk also had that administrative function.
That is
under
not in the
city
code.
manager. Yes,
So,
it is.
okay,
Yes, it is.
we're okay. We don't need to argue with this right now.
Yeah.
Okay, but I need to say, in order to, I hear what we want to do is move forward. Okay, what I-
Okay. So, and in this request requires you to be open to having the ad hoc committee interview with you and be part of that
I had
decision as to
assumed
who
they
gets
would do
hired.
that.
So you will not have the final say as to
That's
clear.
clear. You have to put them. If I hired someone that you won't appoint, you don't have a clerk. So I'm fine. You hire who, whatever you want. Do it. Do it. Absolutely. You make the decision.
So if you two, or if you can't be persons or whatever, and you pick somebody else as part of the interviewing, vetting, hiring process, perhaps one of these 5 would be working out solution. And that person can be considered for whatever job this could turn into or not. I'm just saying.
So you guys are going to look at the damn candidates now, start from the left. Get them now and see if we can make something of that. It doesn't necessarily preclude us from doing something in the future.
So suggest that we pull the ad right now, so we don't get more applicants. We have 5. If it fits, if something fits, then we go with it, and then we we potentially start over with the ad that you guys were expecting to.
It's not expand the advertising.
Absolutely.
One expand our 2 newspapers, then maybe
Mhm.
1 to 2 weeks we close the hiring process
Yeah,
and then move forward.
but we need to get a few corrections on there. So if you are comfortable reaching out to Ryan on the restrictions on questions, prohibitions for on the application, it would be helpful if you could make those corrections. I know that actually says corrections, but because it's probably a PDF, so we really do have to remove those the questions asking their final salary. To move things along, here's a motion. Hang on to your hats. Do you have an availability this week to do interviews? So we don't have to do weekends. You have to.
I don't. Oh, I mean, I guess it would just depend
Okay.
on the availability of the candidates, and then
We should pick a couple of dates and things. Make an effort. What I'd like to do, I probably have the most flexibility, so I'm trying to find when you are available that we could move forward with a first round of interviews.
Would you guys be okay figuring this out maybe outside of the council meeting after
Okay.
to either we move along with the process or we stay around, you guys can figure out where you're gonna be outside of the
Hmm.
that work.
Yeah, well, let's move forward now, right? So, okay,
So, Andy, would you please be willing to reach out to the ad hoc committee on the city clerk and propose some times for interviewing applicants? My preference would be that we get to kind of do them all in one day, um, or at least within, 1 or 2 days of each other. That way, it is a fresh. I would defer to Michelle's schedule and your availability and meet whatever your availability is to get these candidates interviewed.
I mean, to be honest, I have lunch times available on Thursday and Friday this week.
That wouldn't
what
be
kind of
much
evening? Evenings?
Um,
evenings or Saturday, or do you want to kick it off to the so Swatsky have them appoint another? I mean, you're in this.
yeah, I mean,
I think it'd be fun.
I don't know. I don't feel like, I mean, yes, I'll be part of the process, but I understand that that'll be kind of not not necessary. Seems like maybe one person on the ad hoc could be there for some and one for the other. You know what I mean? But maybe I don't know.
And maybe the higher that we've done it in the city with the questions. It's just,
For sure. Yeah, no, I would expect a template and I would expect yeah, interview questions that we all agreed on. So that seems like a larger process than the discussion tonight.
3 of us to hash out. The goal is within a week. If you have any time this year, yes,
I think you guys will figure it out
Okay.
outside of council meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have conversations with city manager maker about how you proceed with this. City manager maker, would you mind posting this job in 1 or 2 newspapers someplace so that we get a little more search there? Sure. Great. And then is it okay if the current ad hoc continues as the hearing for the recruitment process? The city clerk due to this, you guys have had so much experience with the role and what it where it entails and the legalities of it. How does that sound?
And this is an appointed position, so I think that we can make our recommendations, and if there's 2 great ones, great. But I think ultimately we need to take it back to council for the final choice. We don't. I don't think it should be limited to 2 of us.
Is there any legality to that's the matter, right?
No, I mean, it does need to be, they need to be appointed by the full council. Yeah.
All right, so is that directive semi-clear?
I believe so.
Okay.
What?
So my directive is to work with the ad hoc committee to set up interview schedules for applicants, and then to continue to work with the ad hoc regarding the job description and to post in the North Coast Journal or other publication.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I mean, just to be clear, I don't think that we need to finalize this job description because it is an evolving document. It seems like it's moving all of the time. And so I wouldn't want that to stop any posting or pull any posting or further that. And then I would like to have a start date, a closing date.
That's 3 to 4 weeks. So you can see the 3 to 4 weeks.
I would
I think
rather
closer.
have it done now. I mean, I'm, how long has it been up, Mandy? I'm sorry.
It's been a week.
Only 1 week.
No, it'll be 2 weeks on Thursday, I believe. I
Okay.
think 2 weeks after posting to the North Coast Journal, or 2 weeks from the day of posting in the North Coast Journal and Indeed and whatever newspapers. So that's up for 2 weeks.
Well, I think there's talking about, but there's a possibility that
The first one was like, we can't go, this is what it's fine, but we can't just stop the whole project.
I think the open until filled, which is what it is now, is appropriate. And so that doesn't restrict you from hiring somebody. If you interview the perfect person on Friday, we can just go forward.
Okay.
So let's not push a deadline way out there because
And then we mentioned it, but I don't think that got into as direction for the city manager. But in addition to setting the interview schedule, I think that we should work together on interview questions. So, or ad hoc.
I would recommend, yeah, I don't think,
Got it? Thank you. We may have made a motion to reconsider, and so I withdraw that motion.
You withdraw the motion to the next meeting. Proceedings.
All of the process and keep capital.
We're not gonna boot anybody. We're not gonna boot anybody out.
All right, yeah, that's me. Score. Thank you for it. All right, I don't which the feels resolution number one. I don't believe pretty high document and that's just like Carol land up in the people like and implement how the element for 2019 2025. That session actually
Boy, which item is that?
Number 8.
Okay. So I moved to table this.
Absolutely not.
No,
We have got to
Okay.
get this done.
is there right there.
Well,
So I'll just introduce and Mayor, we can have back here.
Yeah, I think Gary can come forward and present the item.
Support.
Oh yeah. Turn on.
No,
And is it Gary, is the green light on here?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You had trained me so well. Good evening, council members. I don't have a presentation planned for this evening. I've given a number of things, so I think we're good there. Just wanted to note that this was noticed for a public hearing. So that means that the council would have the ability to adopt the housing element update this evening if you so choose. The resolution that was noted by the mayor basically contains the findings for adoption. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. As it notes in the staff report, the council asked to push this item 60 days to reconsider it. So here we are 60 days later. Just so you're aware, I didn't receive any comments from anybody during that time, or I didn't have any inquiries or any meetings or anything about the housing element update. We were contacted by the Department of Housing and Community Development. They keep prompting us, asking when we're going to adopt the housing element update. The reason being is that funds from the local early action planning grant program were used to do the housing element update. That's the only way the city could afford it. And I believe that in order to close out the grants, they're waiting for adoption to occur. So just something for the council to be aware of. Otherwise,
who is that grant with?
it's LEAP grants,
Okay.
local early action planning grant, and it's through the Department of Housing and Community Development. So I'm sure they have a grant officer there who's expected to kind of track these things down and figure out when grants are going to be closed out. So I just let him know that the council was still considering the housing element update, and we'd report back later, basically. So anyway, that's all I have. I'm obviously available to answer any questions. So let me know.
is there a deadline to the social?
Yeah, yeah. Each housing development planning cycle, you're supposed to take certain actions at the beginning of the cycle. So yeah, typically they want you to do it within the first few years. In order to prompt that, they become punitive if certain actions aren't taken. Like, oh, now you have to plan for this because you didn't accomplish this within the first year of the housing development planning cycle. Things like that. So obviously Blue Lake's, deep into the cycle at this point. The next one's coming up in a couple of years. But yeah, to date, I mean, HCD hasn't taken any action against the city or anything like that. More just kind of issued warnings when we've talked with their housing accountability unit. So I don't know what that would look like, honestly, if they were to take action. I've heard they can sue a community, they can issue fines, things like that. But yeah.
The buy rate piece of the update. That was not part of the update originally, is that right?
You're referring to implementation program 14, which proposes uh, to basically create the multifamily combining zone and apply it to a property in the city. Yeah, so that's basically been a requirement for a couple planning cycles.
Go ahead.
The city's never wanted to do it, and we've also never considered combining zone. The original direction was pick a zone in the city that already exists and allow by right multifamily developments. No council to date has been willing to do that in the city of Blue Lake. So the last time the city had a certified element was in 2004. It hasn't happened since, and that was been one of the sticking points. So
And so the combining zone, um, I guess I'm wondering, I know that you have a plan for the combining zone, and has HCD already said that they would accept your plan where you apply it to parcel of, what was it, 1 acre or greater?
yeah, we haven't obviously said like, here's the parcel, what do you think? You know, it's more, here's the parameters in which you need to apply it. So it needs to be over 1 acre, you know, things like that. There's certain parameters they've laid
And
out.
what do you have to do it? How often do you have to apply that combining zone?
The way we're proposing to use it is one, create it, adopt it, and then apply it to a single property. Our hope is that that can be used each planning cycle on a single property if necessary. You know, obviously, at some point, it'll run out of properties years from now to apply it to. But that's the idea that we can use it in that targeted way where we can say, okay, we have to do this by right zoning. We have a tool, we're in control of where it goes. The state's not dictating that to us, and we would be able to do that, or I should say, the council would be able to do that on a targeted basis, each housing element planning cycle. That's the idea.
Meeting the requirement.
What's that?
Meeting that.
In order to meet the requirement and show that you have a site in a county, the by right zoning is meant for lower incomes. So, you know, let's be clear about that. That's the reason we're doing it. Because if you have the by right zoning, it's believed by the state that you're more likely to get, you know, affordable housing.
Hmm.
So it's really intended to make sure you have adequate sites to meet your lower income RETA. That's the whole point. Right. Because you're probably, if it's by right, it's not like it's gonna facilitate above moderate housing or things like that. This is really about the lower.
So
level.
if cycle you designate the same property, like it didn't get developed before.
That's a good question. No. If the property doesn't get developed, what the state's going to ask is, analyze why. What happened? What else was going on? Was it market conditions? Is it possibly some of the development standards that were inhibiting things? They're going to want you to analyze why it didn't get developed. Yeah. And you'll see that's some of what we did in the current housing element update. We were looking past sites and saying what were the reasons why maybe they weren't developed. So
So I guess that eventually every available area in town could have that combining zone.
there's other ways to do it too. I mean, you could pick a zone at some point and say it's allowed by right here, you know, that kind of thing. When you run out of sites at some point, which can happen in the future, they'll say up zone, annex, you know, those are the options they typically throw out for communities. Blue Lake is not in that situation yet. It probably won't be for several house development planning cycles.
The next cycle, I mean, they're always different years, right? Like this current cycle was 8 years or 10 years.
This was 8 years, and I think going forward there'll be 8 years. There was a time in the past where they were every 5 years, but the laws have evolved over time.
So Gary, just so you're aware, the reason why you did questions from me is because I thought we were going to have a planning commission combined
Yeah,
meeting with the city council. So
no worries. Yeah,
we're only given one day.
yeah,
Yeah, like I was out of town for
right.
I'm gonna. So I just thought we were gonna reschedule that sometime. I do have some questions I can ask right now, though.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So is it true that the wastewater treatment plant cannot sustain the expected growth from projects?
So I just want to be clear that the housing element again is not making projects happen. It's not approving projects. It's just identifying sites that are already zoned for residential development where the RENA allocation could potentially be accommodated. That's all it's doing. Right now, with the existing approved developments and those that are anticipated, at some point the city would reach capacity in its wastewater plant. It's not exactly known when that would happen. And the city has had plans for upgrades to it for years. That conversation really first started when the Mad River Brewery wanted to expand. They wanted to double production. The city was going to have to do those improvements they're proposing now. Those folks eventually chose not to do that, so the city didn't do the improvements. But the city has their cost estimates. They know exactly what needs to be done. It's been looked at by the city engineer. So those would just need to be done. And they would add 180 residential equivalent units to the system, which is more than adequate to accommodate pretty much mostly the full general plan build out, to be honest, including the projects in the Powers Creek district. Anything beyond that, I've had explained to me, and this isn't my area of expertise, but the improvements would not be as simple as what they're proposing now. They'd have to be mechanical or some kind of expansion to the system.
So, cool. You're not done.
So we can keep going.
Well, I've been told that the sewer treatment plant is permitted on, I don't know, maybe a 5 year, every 5 years it gets permitted. And I don't know the agency that does that permitting, but
Oh,
I've also,
water board or
okay, and I've been told um, that the current system might not get permitted into the future, that certain kinds of upgrades and improvements and changes in the system might need to be done.
I have never heard that. In fact, we just had our walkthrough yesterday with our inspector, and he said we've got the best looking plant that he's seen in the state. And that one of the problems that we have is that our plant is so efficient and runs so well that we don't qualify for a lot of grants because we don't have problems. So I've never heard anything like that.
Sorry, he's an inspector from where?
State Water Resource Control Board,
yeah,
How often does he do an inspection?
they come out at least once a year, if not more.
yeah, the city's been in good standing for some time. You discussed some of the housing element update. There's a number of awards on the wall about
We win
best
regional awards
small
all the
plant,
time.
all that kind of stuff. So it's in pretty good shape.
Mhm.
But it's valid. It's discussed in the housing element update. At some point, the city, when doing its projected build out in its general plan, will reach capacity, and it has planned improvements in the queue that it would need to do to accommodate that growth. And HCD understood that when they read the housing element update and said, okay, include a policy that commits you within a certain period after adopting this to doing those upgrades. So you will see a policy in there that says something like within 2 years of adopting the element that the upgrades will be done.
Well, we would have to fund those.
Yeah, initially, that's typically how it occurs. The jurisdiction will fund them, and then the proposal is for the city to collect wastewater impact fees. So there'd be a certain amount allotted to each residential equivalent unit. And the city engineer and public works would have to determine like what are the residential equivalent units that this project would require, and then they would pay impact fees equivalent to that, which would essentially pay the city back over time.
If we're not, if we're not qualified for grants, then we'll have to pay for the payers. Great.
It gets paid by the projects, paid back by the projects. So their impact to the system gets paid for by their project.
Right, but if we're gonna do a big 180 unit upgrade before any of those, projects happen, then we have to.
We
pay
have
for that
capital
upgrade.
improvement funds that are sitting there that are capacity building funds. That's part of those fees, is to build in capacity to the systems. So every time someone buys a connection fee to water and wastewater, they pay into that fund that is there specifically to improve capacity.
And what is the expected price tag for this
We
capacity
think it
improvement?
was like, the last estimate I saw was
The original estimate was like 300,000. I think
Sounds
it's
good.
500 now or something. I'm not sure exactly, but
it's really just adding a few aerators and upgrading the electrical is all. It's
they're
pretty
actually
minimal.
fairly minor improvements, but it can be costly.
It's also, we're also working on our collection system too, which is also a big problem for us for capacity. If we didn't have so much I&I in our collection system, we would have on paper a lot more capacity for our wastewater system for residential units. So the problem is that our stormwater system infiltrates and then goes to the treatment plant, and it has to be treated as if it was wastewater. And so it skews the actual loading on the plant because we have to accommodate for the highest peak use. but the normal everyday use is much, much lower and probably could already accommodate much
Yeah,
of the
and
residents.
inflow and infiltration problems are very common. So essentially, it leaks in the system. It allows water to get in there during wet periods like the winter, and it increases the flows to the system during that time. So when communities are able to work on their I&I problems, that's also a way of increasing the capacity of the system.
Gary, HR1 through HR23 list general funding programs as a funding source.
Yeah.
There is no such benefit analysis, no identification of conflicts of grants and notes in the total identification process.
Yeah, some of those are unknown. And essentially, what we're doing here with this housing element update is we're meeting the requirements of state law for a housing element update, which doesn't require those elements. As those get implemented, a staff report to the council, for example, would have typically those items noted. This is the estimated cost, financial impact, et cetera, when they're actually brought forward and implemented. You don't usually at the time of the housing element update include that information. It's not required by state housing law. That's for the city's own purposes.
Does Government Code 65583C share program define guidelines and default funding budgets?
Where's this? Let me take a look.
Government Code 65583C, which requires actual program.
Which is it one of the implementation programs?
It's on this references 15 through 21.
So what specifically does it
It's
say which program you're referring to?
It's HL1 through HL14. There's no um
I'm not clear.
defined guidelines or funding sources directed to the government's cost of the program.
Okay, but with the government code section you were referring to.
65553.
Yeah, which program is that noted?
Don't know.
Okay. So it'll be hard for me to answer that question, but basically understand again that this has been reviewed by HCD and found to be consistent with state housing law. And at the time of doing a housing element update like this, you're not required to identify these specific funding sources. That's something that would occur at the time you actually go to implement these things. And obviously that'd be important information that the council would consider, but you're not required to do that at the stage of preparing your housing element update.
Did the city use an outdated third cycle claims in the D and then to warranty for review?
Jurisdictions often use or do an addendum, and that's what we initially attempted to do, was to use, that one from the third cycle, the last one that was done the last time it was adopted. And we brought that forward with an addendum. And so typically what an addendum says is um, the prior findings of that CEQA document are still applicable to the current RENA allocation. That's essentially what it was saying. Now, what the public said is, well, but there's outdated information in there. We'd like you to update info on the fire department and police and different things like that. So what we did is we got a grant from the Regional Early Action Planning Grant Program, which was administered by HCOG, and we prepared a new initial study negative declaration, and that's what you have before you. So in the staff report, it kind of explains the process for preparing that, circulating it. There's public comments on it that are included in your packet, things like that. And just to be clear, doing addendums to prior CEQA documents for housing element updates is not uncommon. Jurisdictions do that.
And was the sequel document formally passed in 2004? When was the last time it passed?
It was, yeah. Yeah. But in essence, RENA allocations weren't drastically different. And those allocations were still, it's the same thing. These are sites we have in the community that are already zoned for residential development. And that housing happening is, in essence, within the projected general plan build out. So the issues weren't really substantially different. However, in response to public comment asking for updated information, we did a new CEQA document.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I know there's a lot said about the circulation element and how a lot of folks feel that that should be addressed before we adopt the housing.
Yeah.
I know some of the answers that have been given is that, well, you know, this current transportation in and out of town used to convey a whole lot more trucks and that sort of thing. When the power grid was running and so forth. But um, the traffic and people living down in First Creek area too, they live. And so I'm concerned about that. Um,
And can I just clarify? We're talking just about increase in volume of traffic that's the concern.
not, not you, it's, that's for excellence for uh, potential evacuation routes. Lots of people living in a place that really does not have anyone, and one way in, one way out, you know, uh, you know, I hear a lot of one way in, one way out thing, and to get out of here, get out, you got to go speed bumps, and there's no quick direct way out anymore. So, case of fire, or you know, uh, we just haven't. It feels like we haven't really addressed that situation yet. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, Blue Lake's had the same circulation infrastructure for decades. When they did their public safety element, which was also grant funded in the 70s, they were projecting a lot of growth in the community. I don't think at any point they identified emergency access as being an overwhelmingly concerning issue. I mean, we say one way in, one way out, but that's not actual the reality. I mean, there's several ways to get in and out of the community. You can go south, you can go east, you can go west. It's not just the industrial truck route is the only way to get in and out of the community. Um, to kind of talk a little bit about the circulation element, I mean, it looked at the baseline conditions at that time were a substantially higher level of traffic in the community. And it was projecting out an increase. They were projecting in the general plan there would be growth of hundreds of more residents, hundreds of more residential units. And they were
When was this last one? I'm sorry.
basically the only major general plan update Blue Lake has ever done was in the mid 1980s.
So
And it
it's
was
the 1980s.
Yeah, it was
thing, okay.
piecemealed over time. It started with a public safety element, the noise element in the 70s, and then eventually they had the land use and circulation, housing and downtown and all this stuff. So Blue Lake has never really done a comprehensive general plan update. But in essence, they were projecting out uh, growth, right? Blue Lake was supposed to have more traffic over time as the community grew, according to its growth projections in the general plan. It never happened. Basically things went backwards, right? So traffic levels went down, population went down, economic activity, some of it disappeared in the downtown and the industrial part. So most communities actually grow under their general plan. Blue Lake did not. So the increase in traffic that could potentially result from, development of Powers Creek District and these sites we've identified, that might get the city back up to baseline conditions in the 80s. Maybe it actually moves towards us being in the growth projections and adding some traffic beyond baseline conditions several decades ago. The cumulative traffic study that was done for the Powers Creek District that looked at the Danko project, the Rousseau project, Paradise K, and the Courtyard. They looked at emergency access. They looked at level of service, which isn't even a secret requirement anymore, but we still had to look at it. That means how long you wait at an intersection. They looked at vehicle miles traveled, traffic safety, all those things, and the conclusions were there wouldn't be any significant impacts, either individually or cumulatively, from those projects. So that's the most recent analysis that been done looking at the greatest growth potential that could happen in the community, which is down in the Powers Creek district.
What year was that study done?
So it was 22, 23. Yeah, and it's available on the city's website.
So now,
Oh, sorry.
And just to, so Danco did make some adjustments to their project. They added a few additional units, and I asked them to have the traffic consultant update their findings based on the changes in that project, and the conclusions were still the same regarding that there would be, no significant impacts traffic-wise related to those issues I previously mentioned.
Do you know what the population of Blue Lake was in the mid-80s?
It was 1,200 something. And when
Similar
you,
to now.
when they,
11.
actually, it's like, yeah, it's 1150 now or something.
Close
Yeah.
to 1,500.
Yeah.
Tricks that are used too at that time from 45 years ago, what we would be willing to do to ourselves or our community or our neighbors is really different these days. So, the metrics that they're using measure and say, well, we're at this capacity and we can do it again. I think,
Well, yeah.
not just, uh, clearly it's not just about the capacity of the roads, it's about the amount of noise, it's about the vibration, it's about the dust, the particulate in the air. Um, I think there are many factors that we have to look at. What this town was in 1985, or sorry, in the 1980s, is different than the people who live in it now, or many of them live in it now, what their expectations are, what their desires are. So I don't know that it's fair to use that as a benchmark necessarily.
Well, it is in that there's been a lot of comments that this growth is not consistent with the general plan. That invites that
Mhm.
discussion.
Right,
You
but
know,
the general
so
plan is from the 80s. That's what I'm saying.
sure, and they used the level of service standard
Mhm.
back then, which that traffic study also used. And what that means is, will your circulation system operate acceptably? How long will people have to wait at intersections? Can it handle the volume of traffic? Those are all things that were looked at in that traffic study, not because they were required today by the California Environmental Quality Act, but because I knew people cared about it in the community, and we're going to want to see that analysis because it was comparable to what happened in the 80s. And it is relevant to talk about what happened in the 80s because that is still the general plan we're operating under. That is still the one that we are operating under those growth projections. So it is totally relevant. That is our general plan. It has a certain general plan build out discussed in it. And I think what we're pointing out in all of this documentation you see is that what's proposed, or I should say, what's identified as development in the housing element update is consistent with those growth projections.
And just to clarify too, the housing element doesn't, it's not preventing or hindering development in the Powers Creek district. That can happen already. The high density development can happen there already without this house based upon our zoning. So I know there's a thought process that the housing element is directly tied to specific projects taking place, and it's just not true. It does have a connective point for funding and financing as incentivizing, but it's not um, by not adopting this as not a tool to prevent development. That development can already take place under its current zoning.
Yeah, if you weren't to adopt this, you'd basically be in violation of state housing law, and those projects could happen anyway. So I'm not really seeing the benefit there.
I think I take a little bit of offense to that because that keeps getting repeated. And my issues with this general plan here confined to, I'm sorry, to this,
Housing.
the housing update are relevant to overall growth. And this isn't about a particular project. So that keeps, kind of being thrown at the council, and I take exception to it.
You may, but it's been
Yes, I
stated over and over again, so that's why it's relevant to know. I've heard from people in the community that they understand or believe that if this housing element update is not approved, that'll inhibit Danco's ability to get funding to do the project. That's been stated. I've heard it at council meetings. I've heard it at planning commission meetings. That is an understanding in the community. It's also something the state is very aware of. That if you're attempting to use your housing element update to prevent affordable housing projects, they actually have laws on the books now that will go after cities for that type of action. So I understand maybe you don't feel that way, but that has been expressed in the community. I will note that implementation measure HI 15 acknowledges, the potential need for updates to a general plan after doing a housing element update. It states, the city will review its safety and conservation elements and any other general plan elements as required to ensure compliance with the new state law. So it's calling that out, that And that's typically what jurisdictions do. And for to do a comprehensive general plan update along with your housing element update, you take care of the highest priority first, which is the housing element update, which is basically subject to strict requirements by the state for updating every 8 years. And then afterwards, you go back and you address any potential inconsistencies or need to comply with state law and those other elements. A community like Blue Lake most likely can't afford a comprehensive general plan update. So for you guys, you would want to take care of the housing element first and then address the other elements on an as needed basis as you can afford to do so.
Like that. Also that the general, it's not written that would change the whole general plan. But for all the elements within that general plan, what would be the order that you would say, hey, let me address this one, that one, this one, that one? What sequence do you go into update?
First and foremost, the housing element update.
Obviously,
Then
yes.
secondly, because it's identified in state law that when you adopt or update your housing element update, that you deal with safety and conservation, those would be the next two highest priorities because that is prescribed in state law. And then after that, it would really be up to the council. The reason we brought up the circulation element is because some work was already done on that as part of a grant between 2012 and 2015. We did a draft. I think we presented it to the Planning Commission. But anyway, that one has had work done on it. It would maybe be the most ready to move through the process after safety and conservation.
Okay.
Gary, what did we grant?
The LEAP grants, I seen 2020 or 2021, something like that. The other grant I was speaking of, the Strategic Growth Council grant, was received in around 2012.
And the lead grant we got in 2021. 2021 was the one that locked this timeline, is that correct?
It's just simply the one that paid for updating the housing element. Yeah, the timeline is there, prescribed in state law already, independent of any funds the state might make available.
Right, it's already
Yeah, yeah, every 8 years you've got
a
it.
standard.
Yeah, yeah.
So we had housing, safety and conservation, in the state law, but then we have circulation element, and shortly you're proffering that as the number 3 because there's already a lot of work done on it. So it
Yeah,
moves
other
so
than that,
quickly.
you probably want to look at your land use element, just make sure everything's good. But that was updated in 2021 for consistency with the opportunity zone and the Powers Creek District planning process. Not only that, we've done a bunch of incorporation of what they called sustainable development principles at the time of the strategic council grant. So that just never got moved forward until the opportunity zone planning process. The council was like, that's nice, good work, but we don't have any more grant money, so we're not going to move forward with adopting this because it's a process, you know. But yeah, I would say after housing, safety, conservation, I'd probably take a peek at your land use just to make sure it's consistent with state law and especially any of the requirements in these implementation programs, circulation, and after that, yeah, you've got noise. It's actually
Mhm.
it's pretty old, but there's some good policies in there. Um, you've got open space as
Mhm.
part of the land use element, but that is another one. Um, anyway,
Well, and I know I'm digressing a little bit, but it helps kind of inform the overall picture of what we're looking at. And
yeah,
Mandy, do you think it would be useful? I mean, I kind of like this. Hey, here's a possible sequence if we were to work through, as we're also talking about goals and visioning.
that's a
So
good point.
if you had if your staff had opportunity and you wanted to forward that, that would be a useful outline to, hey, here it is. This is why. So a good guide. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. You know, after you guys mentioned your council goals, I was like, well, planning department should like provide some input on that. You know, I know it's a
Here's your
little
invitation.
little off topic, but
Okay.
if you adopt your housing element, there's implementation programs that have to be implemented. You know, within certain time periods that are prescribed in here. Obviously, you have all the stuff going on with the development of the Powers Creek district. You have what we just discussed, potential updates that are needed to your general plan elements. And then you guys had mentioned cleanup amendments to your municipal code, which are needed for zoning code reasons as well.
Mhm.
So those were just some of the things I jotted down as I was thinking about that.
I like it. You stayed awake for all that?
There's the
It was
Can I get
exciting.
some water? You guys.
Your secret weapon.
4 hours. So, the HL, sorry, the HI 22
They're HI. It's housing implementation, HI.
So it's HIC means you're also the options.
So actually what it does is it just makes clear that you full development standards. Because right now the code's written in a wishy-washy way. It's like development needs to be consistent with the mixed use design guidelines or the downtown design guidelines. What HCD's made very clear to us is those aren't actually legally enforceable. So be careful about saying, development needs to be consistent with those. They can be advisory. People could consider doing it, but it's not an enforceable objective development standard. It actually creates uncertainty in the process because you'll be leaving it to the decision makers whether to decide if it's consistent with those guidelines.
And then HI19 is use the setbacks to also increase the building height. What's the next building height we would expect with this need?
Well, first off, what I would note is all of those revisions are intended to treat multifamily housing equally amongst the zones in the city that allow it. You have certain zones that were written in the 80s that look to be written to inhibit multifamily housing. In HCD's analysis, they went through the code and they said, explain to us why these wouldn't inhibit multifamily housing or affordable housing. And when we looked at it, we said, we can't. I can't explain to you why it's not consistent for multifamily housing in these different zones. So it's not really that it's increasing, it's more providing consistency among the zones for how multifamily housing is treated. Is there a particular one you're interested in? It pertains to R2, R3, and MU, very consistent in their treatment relative to some of the other zones that allow it. The PDR zone was clearly written to inhibit multifamily housing. That's where, for the last several planning cycles, we've been saying most of the residential development potential was. But if you look at this closely, you'll see the rationale for why these. There's actually an analysis, not just it's not just this implementation program. There's analysis in the element that explains the reason and does the analysis that HCD requested.
So what's our max is like 45.
So for multifamily development in the city of Blue Lake, I believe 45 feet is the maximum building height in the R3 zone, in the opportunity zone, in the downtown, the RC zone,
45, sorry, 45 feet, like 2 stories.
45 feet
Like
can accommodate up to 4 stories typically. You may know with a flat roof situation or something like that. Potentially 35 feet, which is allowed in the R1 single family zone, could potentially accommodate 3 stories, but again, you'd have to be careful with how you design your roof.
And then the city, because the planning department, sorry, the planning commission decided they want to foot houses that are building if they're one.
Well,
Or be anything.
we'd have to change the rules for that first off. Somebody could potentially use state density bonus law to get a little bit higher height. That's already allowed under state law. I guess somebody could ask for a variance, but it maybe be hard to make the findings because that's kind of a personal preference to just say I want to be taller. Like, what's the need? Is there constraints on the site that necessitate that? There's very strict findings for a variance. So typically, you're either going to be relying on state density bonus law to allow increases in height beyond the code here. You're going to have to change your rules to allow something like that. There is the ability to ask for a conditional use permit also to have exceptions to development standards in certain zones, but that is a discretionary review by the planning commission that could be appealed to the council.
Last question, I think. By right, multi-story development each by 14. Is that the same as by right?
That is the one we've been talking about. That's the one. Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions for council? Open up the public for comment. Anything? No comments? Yeah. You want to talk to the mic or if you want to record it?
Well, it's just the byline. I just can't quite understand. So I think that's what a lot of people in the community, it's like, just give people the right to do whatever they want to know. I just don't quite understand what you have to explain for. Sorry.
I totally understand that people are weirded out by that term. It basically just means that you need a building permit and you're subject to all the development standards of the code. That could be height, setbacks, ground coverage, off-street parking, landscaping, you name it. So it's not that you can do whatever you want. It's just that instead of needing a conditional use permit from the planning commission, you need a building permit from the building department. You still have to follow all the same development standards. And if you look at each zone, it's broken out by the things that are allowed, principally permitted, or by right, and the things that require a use permit. This would be moving multifamily into on a particular site into the category of principally permitted instead of needing a use permit. That's it. All the other regulations that are applicable would apply to a development in that situation.
We have another comment from the chair, or another comment from Julie Christie. Go ahead, Julie.
Hey guys, I'm just gonna go back to comments I've made in the past. I really cannot say that I've ever seen 140 something pages actually looked at and reviewed with what the state added, what we added additionally to the state, and changed our housing element. We've been given presentations, but nowhere in time have we really gone through and been like, this is the edit, this is the edit, this is the addition, this is the redaction. And that's really concerning to me when it's 140 something pages. And I hope that our council has had time to review that. I don't think our general plan is really outdated in sense. I mean, it's very core to a lot of realistic ethics for this community, and infrastructure is one of the biggest things that it did outline for buildings. So I really feel like it was inappropriate to shove this item into the tonight, an overwhelming night. It should have been a special agenda or special meeting, and I still think it warrants that validness. Now, the state sees we are continually trying to make progress. And while we get threatened by that all the time, please add in the packet the correspondences. I did recommend the council send in a letter and get your own verification of the standing, get your own statement to them of our progress and what we're working on. But circulation to the public and public involvement is something that could put the brakes on this pretty hard because there's been lack thereof. And all the meetings predominantly have been recorded to prove the points that I'm making. So I do think that we need to make better communication with these entities we're being loomed over by, with direct communication between our council and them. Let you guys see these correspondences, because us as public, we just hear about them and we never see them. And I don't think the scripture, it changes a lot. Like Gary, you did say that for basically, I won't say it's like to push a project through, but to streamline one, that we did need to pass a lot of these things for Danco to get state funding. I mean, that's recorded. So I just feel like there's a lot of still biffs out there and a lot of stuff that needs to be ironed out in a way that everybody actually sees what's in that 140 pages, you guys. Like, it's a lot more than just what the state's requiring us. And it goes against a lot of our general plan that I think is very smart and well thought out. So I'll leave it at that. Long night.
Oh, what? Alright.
Or are you there?
Oh, I am. I didn't hear
I
you.
didn't
I'm
hear
sorry.
you. I'm sorry.
So I know it's I think it's more of a question I asked Gary about when we had the town hall presentation of the housing element, and it's in regards to the arena number that Blue Lake has in place, or I'm sure that's probably not the right way to explain it, but my question is, I know that the cycle restarts or will come up again in about 3 years. And at that time, there'll be an additional expectation um, above what, if we pass this particular housing element, there'll be another one for additional housing. And whether or not Blue Lake can accommodate the additional, we might be in the same position with the state, trying to explain why we can't meet that. number. And so since it's not that far off, I mean, 3 years is really not that far off. Um, and if we're not in great danger yet of being fined or something like that with the state, and it gives us additional time to really work out some of the other concerns that people have with growth. And if Danco can still build their project without this housing element needing to be passed, maybe some further discussion and understanding and planning might help us meet the housing element that'll be coming up in a short amount of time. You know how fast 3 years goes by. So that's just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. A last call for public comment. Seeing none, we can take it back up to council for a deliberation. So, council, what are your thoughts on next steps?
Something Julie said kind of rang a bell for me. We have not ever seen, I don't think, the correspondence from HCD. Just seeing the changes in the housing element.
Yeah, if I could respond to that a little bit, that commenter, didn't have the benefit of being involved in the process through all the years that we've worked on this. That's been stated a couple times at meetings that we didn't bring iterative drafts to the planning commission, that we didn't go line by line. That's just untrue. We did the same process that any jurisdiction in the state of California does to update a general plan element. And it is an iterative process. And you do bring back drafts with track changes. I think we went through 2 or 3 rounds of review by HCD. Absolutely. We can provide that stuff.
Changes, but I
Yeah.
don't see any. I see the justifications for them. Right? Is that all in writing? Like, I mean, I saw the document, the original document, 115 pages, and then I saw the next one with the red stuff,
Yeah.
the next one with the red stuff. And I don't know that each of those changes was justified, or if there was, I don't know, how does that work? Do they,
The way that works is that we basically receive their comments and then we go back and discuss the comments with the planning commission. Then they provide direction, staff works with them to determine what changes do we need to make to be responsive to these comments. And then we discuss those at public hearings, and the public's available to attend and listen as they did throughout the process. And then eventually it gets to a point where the commission's like, okay, we're good. We think we've been responsive, and staff go ahead and resubmit this for HCD for their next round of review. And then if it's good, they'll say, meets state housing law, or it doesn't. We have to do that 2 or 3 times, where we find,
comments that you're responding to? Where are those comments?
like I said, we can absolutely present those to the council. But those are here at City Hall. I mean, they have copies of them digitally and probably in paper. Um, they were presented numerous times, to the community throughout the process. It's not as though those were never available. Some of that was presented to the council at the time, when we were going through that. But typically, by the time it gets to the council, you're presenting the planning commission's recommendation, which is more closer to a finished product, essentially. Because that's the purpose of your planning commission, is to go through that process on your behalf. And typically you appoint people to the planning commission that have the expertise to go through that process and do a good job doing so. And typically Blue Lake's had pretty good planning commissions that have done well on projects like housing element updates. So anyway, that process totally did occur. If the council would like to see the comment letters from HCD, we absolutely can provide those for your review. Sure.
And the other question, I know several people comment on the housing element, and I'm wondering, I haven't seen anything that shows how their comments were incorporated into any sort of a finished product. So I'm wondering, is this just an exercise in futility to ask the public, give the public an opportunity to comment on the update because none of those comments are incorporated, or it's just
Again, the way the process works is we get the comment letter from HCD, present to the planning commission. note these are the type of changes we have to make. We go make those changes. We brought it back to public hearings. We discussed it with the commission and the public. So what we could do is potentially say, okay, here was the original draft. Here was the comment letter. Here was the next draft. Here was the comment letter. Here was the next draft. And you can see what was done at each iterative step of the process to be responsive to the HCD comments. That'd probably be the simplest way.
Right. Is there any, I mean, how have you been or the process been responsive to people's comments? Housing instead of
Like in the letters in the packet.
So typically, those comments would be received through the review process by the planning commission. That's typically how it works, because again, by the time it gets to you guys, it's more of a finished product. But basically, the commission considers those comments, and then they would provide direction to staff as to whether they thought revisions were needed. We also, in the element updates, discussed some of the comments we received and whether they resulted in revisions to the housing element updates. Let me see if I can find, yeah, so comments received. So on page 5 and 6, it notes, who provided comments, the primary comments received, it summarizes them, and then it discusses if revisions were made. There were some revisions made. To be honest, a lot of the comments that were received weren't really relevant to the housing element update. A lot of it was concerned just about general growth in the community. A lot of it was concerned about the Danko projects, things like that. So you can see that on pages 5 and 6. That question that you had, John, that's noted in here. Several commenters requesting that a new sequential study be prepared. So, we do document what the substantive comments were and any potential revisions that occurred based on that. And that process is also worked through, like I said, with the planning commission.
What would a new sequel process, what would it entail? Like the time?
Well, we did a new CEQA process.
I meant to the previous one, right?
So again, we tried to initially do an addendum to that prior CEQA document. As it notes here on page 5, based on the comments, we then obtained grant funding to redo a CEQA initial study declaration. Yeah. So, and it costs, I think, about 18,000, something like that, to go back through that process. That was what we received from READ.
What's ADU tracking in AFFH complaints?
I assume 80. Okay, so ADU tracking is basically following what accessory dwelling units are developed in the community. And beyond ADUs, we have to track all housing development. Substantial rehabs, new units, demos, things like that every year in the annual progress report that goes to HCD. The next one's due April 1st, very soon. That requires us to get all the building permit records and final inspection stuff and all of that from our building inspector, and then putting it into an annual report to the state saying, here's what's happened with housing. Here we are on implementing our housing element programs. Here's even with report on use of the LEAP funds and where we were at in the process of using those funds. So that's an annual process. It includes tracking ADUs, certainly, but not just ADUs, any housing development.
But we have no operating budget to fund that grant or how it.
Yeah, a lot of these are unfunded mandates, sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Any other questions for council? Do we want to take any kind of action?
I would like to make a motion to adopt resolution number 1235 in accordance with the planning commission's recommendations.
Second.
We have first on the floor and have a second. All those in favor of adopting the housing element? Resolution 2025-1225, adopting amendments to the Village General Plan to update and implement the housing element for 2019-2027 planning cycle. All those in favor say aye.
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 The motion does not pass. Unbelievable.
Did you want to do nays or abstain?
I want to hear some nays
Nays.
or abstains. Okay. So here we go again.
Okay.
Oh,
I would like those for the record for sure.
yeah, I would too.
So
Next-
usually in
next
the
action.
past, when we've
Next
worked on
action.
things like a general plan element,
Mhm.
understood that, obviously you guys didn't adopt it this evening. So what would be helpful is what you need from staff. Because obviously our job is to provide you sufficient information so you can make an informed decision. Is there additional information you need? Uh, you would ask for at least information showing the iterative process, the letters from HCD, the drafts in response to those comment letters. That's something we can bring back to the council. John, you had also noted that you were potentially interested in a joint meeting with the planning commission.
That's what we scheduled.
Yeah, so there's that as well. So if the council could provide some direction to staff on what you would like us to do as far as next steps, beyond the things I just mentioned.
I think we'll get back to you on that.
Yeah.
Okay. Is this something you would like to see continued as far as the public hearing to the next regularly scheduled meeting, or?
I think that we can bring it up in future agenda items.
Okay, so then we would renotice the public hearing for that future meeting.
Potentially.
Otherwise, you would continue the public hearing now.
Sorry.
You would continue the public hearing now, usually to a date certain, or you would just say no, and we would do renoticing and all that for when you actually choose to take it back.
What is the will of council?
I think we're
I'm not-
we're dying on the amount of work that we have to do, what it requires every weekend. We're going to be busy from now through June with the budget. We've got Fest in September. Um, we have quite a lot of work on our plate right now, and maybe with a little bit more time we'll get a better consensus with council. But I don't see that happening right now. I don't want to see this again next month. And I don't like at 11 o'clock when I see it.
I would like to have the attorney present too. I would like to hear a little bit more about 1037. I would like to hear a little bit more about our exposure to litigation and our liability. And I would like to hear a little bit more about some of the consequences in other areas because I have been doing my homework.
Yeah, and I would defer to the city attorney on that. Again, my job's to
Yeah, sure,
do
sure.
the planning
Yeah.
side of it, but the attorney would need to advise you on legal consequences.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
mean-
think you'll need a closed session on exposure to litigation.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're probably right.
Thank you, Gary.
All right. What's the will of council? It's 11 o'clock. Do we want to move forward on these next 3 items, or do we want to postpone it to another meeting?
Next 3 items are
What's the timeline on the sheriff's product? It's time sensitive for review and
The sheriff needs to know the city direction so they can start their budget process.
I think we can do that really quickly.
and animal shelter.
They're both in the same.
Yeah.
You don't want it?
Yeah, and then let me get this further. The Cal Fire in the next. So items 9 and 10, sheriff's office and animal shelter contract. Get those moving. And
The
see
city has
what's
received a contract proposal from Humboldt County Sheriff's Office for law enforcement services for fiscal year 2025-26. The contract proposal maintains the current service level and costs are based upon the cost allocation plans that was developed in the fiscal year 2024-2025 as part of the negotiations for service. City Manager Megan, would you like to fill us in on any of this?
I think it's pretty straightforward. Its current level of service is a $20,000 cost reduction. We do have issues with the county's language regarding indemnification that we're working through with our risk managers.
So this would be approved pending Sierra's approval, essentially.
Yeah, essentially, I'm just asking for authorization for either myself or the mayor to sign the contract upon approval by Sierra based on those contract amounts.
So, I have no problem with this contract. It's the same contract that we had before. And I would like to have whatever communication comes from Sarah. I'd like to be able to see that. I definitely would like to understand anything and everything they have to contribute the best we possibly can. So that would be my request.
Do you have any major concerns about the indemnification clause in the contract, city manager?
Yeah, it's a major concern. They're essentially asking us to assume an liability for their actions, and that's just not what when you contract with someone, you're contracting with them for their expertise and not to assume any liability associated with their actions. And so it's very much an outlier. And this is being reviewed by all Sierra members that contract with the sheriff, including City of Eureka, Arcata, everyone who uses their SWAT teams and everything. So it's a big issue.
So why would we want to make for an express application clause?
We're asking for authorization to move forward upon Sierra's approval of the final language
Because they're working through.
because they're working through the indemnification issue.
Got it. Do
Has
we,
it-
sorry, go ahead.
Has indemnification always been a part of the sheriff's contract?
No, this was language that's new from last year, and we all had major heartburn. We do feel like we have a good legal argument that because there is no scope of control upon the city to the sheriff, that's a good layer of protection under this, but you're still going to get sued. And so the goal of Sierra obviously is to reduce our exposure to litigation. And so no matter what, we feel like we have a good position that we could argue in a court to remove our exposure, but we're going to still have to litigate it. So the goal is to come up with some additional language or some mutually beneficial language to both parties to resolve this issue.
And if issue of indemnification really can't be resolved or Sierra says no, I know that you guys have been, reaching out with Fortuna and that group, and I mean, you're Trinidad and now Arcata. Can you give us a super brief look at what that looks like right now as an alternate term?
Yeah, right now we're still just in conversations and looking at options. Like I said, everyone's having the same issue with this contract language.
So the issue with this previous contract year, yeah, was, I mean, it was a concern, but essentially Sarah said, well, that's the way it is. We're going to cover you going forward, correct?
To a certain extent, yes. They said based upon their review, they feel like there is a defense, but the exposure is still there. And they're not willing to keep assuming that exposure. Sierra's goal, they're risk managers, so their job is to reduce our exposure and to reduce the whole risk pool. So our exposure to litigation exposes the whole risk pool. And when you have things like law enforcement, that's a high, area of opportunity for legal issues. And so the goal is to reduce the city's exposure as much as possible, while at the same time maintaining our option to have service. So they completely understand that.
If we didn't have service through the sheriff's department, we'd have service through somebody else, and we would through somebody else, or even if theoretically if we had our own department, Sarah would have to cover us for our own officers. I understand the difference is because we have control, we train them, we have control, but essentially it's a pretty similar. I don't know. I feel like it's a pretty similar situation.
No.
But regardless, we need law enforcement, and I'm in favor of moving forward.
With the cost reduction, is there any reduction in services? Yes.
No, this is based upon the methodology that we all agreed to through our contract negotiations last year. So it's basically, the sheriff plugs in their projected costs and we get a prorated share of that based on our population.
Do you know if this indemnification is this unique to Humboldt County Sheriff doing this?
It's
They're all
unique
kind of
to
doing
the county right now.
it. But other sheriffs in other counties are also beginning to implement this, or they've always kind of had it.
Not that I know of.
Yeah. Well, unless there's more questions, I'd make a motion to approve the law enforcement contract.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
So the contract allows for 7% and the termination payment is 50%. So we have to pay 7% if we just end the funds.
Can you repeat the question?
Question.
Only dumb answers.
Are you okay with
Yeah.
expanding that motion to include the animal shelter? Or you do want to do all that separate?
I think we should do
I
Separate.
guess to keep it. I guess I'd like to do the animal thing too, but open it up for the public. No public comment. Anyone on Zoom want to comment on the sheriff contract? Julie, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be quick, you guys. You know, the indemnification thing, like, 99.9% of officers already are indemnified. Like, it's just kind of an inherent risk. Now, our risk management team, I would appreciate, like Elise said, we could see some of the correspondences between them. And honestly, where else are we going to go? Is there another potential that we can carry additional liability or find another risk management team? Because our realistic goal right now would be the sheriffs, and then maybe we could work towards other routes. But right now, in the moment, that's our quickest route. And as far as the motion goes, I don't know if I would abide to them turning it down on us. If they turn it down, maybe we need to look for somebody else or figure something out. That's my thoughts.
Thank you very much. Anyone else from the public wish to comment? All right, seeing none, bring it back to council for a decision on the sheriff's contract.
Do we have a motion already?
We did.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of accepting the sheriff's contract, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? None, it passes unanimously. What was that?
Keep up the little bit. This is Chase, somebody just makes you know.
So I need to open up the public after.
No. I say when you say all those in favor, I already got. I mean, if somebody didn't say yes, and they don't have a chance to say no.
But he's so fast
Yeah.
that
Right.
He's
when
super
they, with
efficient.
that, he knows that everybody says yes.
All right, moving on to animal shelter contracts. The city has received a contract proposal from Wakama Animal Shelter for animal shelter services for the fiscal year 2025-2026. The contract proposal maintains the current service levels and costs are based upon the population allocation plan presented by the county. If you have any other comments on the city manager maker?
Do not.
Okay.
I related to animal control. We've learned recently that sheriff's department is applying the same population distribution methodology to animal control services. This is strictly shelter services, not actual animal control. Where somebody calls and says, "There's a loose dog on my porch, and I'm scared to go out the front door because it's barking at me." Whatever. So it's now way more affordable than it used to be. 2 years ago, we got a quote from the sheriff's department. They wanted $26,000 a year to be our contract animal control service. And now it's far more affordable. It's a per capita cost, and I didn't have the figure. I did have it sometime in the last 6 or 10 months, but anyway, it's really affordable. So I would like to suggest that we have Mandy go to the sheriff's department, ask them what that figure is, and give us a number so we can decide if we want to have animal control services through the sheriff's.
But since they're pretty closely related with animal control, that they might move to the shelter, do they have a package deal?
I don't think they do. Okay. I think it's all just a capita thing. What it means is when people call for animal control services, they answer. They would be our fault. Yeah, ask them to enforce certain things, they would do that.
Loose dogs.
Be here every day. They wouldn't, this is, I mean, it would be something that we have to talk about, negotiate, figure out what exactly. But they are the animal control, everyday animal control for the city of Trinidad. And Trinidad adopted that I think a year ago, after they had some dog attack problems and stuff. So it seems like a very prudent thing to consider.
Okay, so I guess I'm confused. But what is the animal shelter contract? I guess I assumed it was the controls. Obviously, it's
dog share costs at the shelter. And if you look at the second page, you'll see. It's working with breakdown. The shelter costs.
right. I guess I
$4 a year to rest.
skipped the word shelter. Okay.
So it looks like the cost went up by 20%. Do they have a reason why it went up?
I don't know, so just in their cost allocation.
I think that it didn't used to be broken up like this, and I think it was the same amount for a long time. And I think they finally figured out what it was actually costing.
And if we
Sure.
don't,
If we don't, then we have to have our own dog shelter. And critters from Blue Lake can't go to the city to the county shelter. Like for instance, Fortuna is not part of this because they have their own shelter. I understand they euthanize a lot of dogs. So
you've got a big yard.
no thanks.
Okay.
Any other questions from council? Open up to the public and move on.
No, no.
Okay. Any comments from public? Julie, go ahead.
I agree. Let's get a quote from the animal control department just so we can make a better decision on this financially. But otherwise, I definitely support it. We need to keep supporting keeping doggos out of trouble, and sometimes that's the resource that we need. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else on Zoom? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council as soon as the council person comes back.
Okay.
So you didn't want to just pass this, you wanted to have it through.
Do you want to pass this? So I would say we make a motion. We head and put it instead of cost fiscal year 2026 and authorize the mayor to execute the coverage fund. Approval by the city's risk manager. I don't think there's a risk manager issue, but shelter exempt.
It's all the same language. So
Oh,
it's just exposure.
So we have a motion.
So that I would ask that city manager maker give us quote for food and control services on our next meeting.
A second.
All right, we have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, it passes. Cal fire, item 11. On February 7th, 2025, governors have signed an executive order regarding the state's schedule to distribute the updated fire hazard severity zone maps for local response areas. The updated map added 1.4 million new acres of land in the higher tiers of fire severity, requiring jurisdictions to update building and planning requirements and regulations. Yeah.
And we could certainly go through this, but I think this is something that we don't have people for here. And I think a lot of people would have lots of questions or want to see this. Can we bring it to the next meeting when there might be more involved?
15. I think we can.
Well, I mean, the recommended action is to direct staff to bring the map adoption ordinance back to council in April for a first reading.
Which needs to be done because we only have a 120-day implementation schedule.
Okay. So it's not really like true.
So, question. From what I could tell, we're all moderate. What did we used to be?
There's a portion of Blue Lake that was added into moderate.
It didn't used to be moderate. What was it? Just
was
not
low.
right.
It was
It was in the knot.
on.
Yeah. So District 40.
What is it?
Okay. And the impact for the city is what?
I don't, it's, the impact is that we adopt it or the state adopts it for us, typically.
So I guess it can affect our home insurance a bit. I can't talk anymore. It's too late. It can affect our home insurance.
Well, that's great because it's already just going through the roof.
But really, this is an introduction that man, if I bring back to the meeting.
Do you guys want to table this till the next meeting, or do we want to move forward and bring it forward in April?
I need to bring it back to you as a first reading for the ordinance because it has to have 2 readings. So it's essentially 60 days at least for the process.
Yeah.
So, and there is no potential impacts, essentially, other than maybe we're all going to pay more for home insurance because we're in the zone?
Yeah, it'd be quite a bit for some people. I mean, if we do the first reading now, and then 60 days, between then and now, we would still have a lot of public input and awareness come. And then we can determine at the end of that 60 days whether we then adopt.
So this is just introducing the item and introducing the severity maps, which have to be done
Yeah.
by today. And then we have 120 days to get the ordinance adopted.
Thank you.
All right. Do you wish to discuss it any further? All right. Open up the public for any comment. None. Anyone on Zoom wish to comment on the CAL FIRE local response area fire severity zone map? Julie, no? All right, we'll bring it back to council.
I would like to make a motion to direct staff to bring the map adoption ordinance back to the council in April for a first reading.
Second. I
We
think
have a first
you
and
got it.
second.
You got it.
I have a third.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, hearing none, passes. All right, future
Good
agenda
job.
items. Future agenda items, anyone have it?
Well,
Do we don't need to repeat the ones that have already been said, right? I mean, sometimes I forget and then I think, oh, I think I already said that last time. But if it's already been done, I mean, already been said.
Do you have a running sheet?
I don't have it.
I would like to bring the Humboldt Waste Management Authority here for a informative discussion presentation.
We need to finish up the review for employees
Right.
as well, so that we'll do.
Closed, yeah,
Close
closed.
that. Do we want to try and do a special so that's all we're focusing on, or do we want to try and pin that at the bottom of the novel meeting?
no, let's just like I know it's more meetings, but the length of these meetings are typical.
Almost just as long.
If we just do the closed session to conclude the performance evaluation.
What are you saying? Do it all by itself?
Yeah, and I don't know, we might have a different closed session item
So,
without the
so
second.
I have it envisioned. It's going to take 2 sessions. It's going to take, and so I don't know if because we can't. I don't know. I think we need to come together twice more. So maybe shorts.
I think what we can do is come together. We need to discuss this in closed session. We can't really discuss this right now. So
Yeah,
let's go ahead and make sure we set up one meeting and either does next Tuesday work for everybody? It'll be short.
No idea.
It'll be like closed and
Tuesday, what time?
I think it would have to be 6:30. I think I have
That's what I
to
know, right?
maybe have to work next Tuesday.
So the first, April Fool's Day.
that's great.
So, yeah. I don't, do I want to? No, but
I mean it's not going to be complicated unless Mandy, do we have any other closed sessions coming up in the future?
No,
Other
share
than,
litigation exposure.
yeah, that.
It's gonna be
Well,
Any
we
of
don't need
that.
the attorney for this evaluation, the first meeting at all.
so
Why
just
not?
we're gonna have 3 meetings next month, correct? We're gonna have 3 meetings.
It'll
Yes, so.
Right?
Okay.
Setting a precedent.
So to think
any other future agenda items?
I would like to have an opportunity to appoint council members to all negotiating teams that are currently in existence. And they, so whatever those are, I mean, there's power transitions, there's the corporation yard situation, there's the Danco project. I would still like there to be an ad hoc committee that is involved in the power plant, other than power transitions, the non-power transitions part of the power plant.
All right.
Agenda coordination between council and commissions.
So you want all of these on for your next meeting?
I don't think
No,
so.
it's just future agenda. And then project tracking and posting. I think a lot of the public.
So yeah, I wrote that down as a timeline. So,
So I'm asking for John if he has that on the
Was that
agenda.
project tracking? I think we do
Yeah,
have that.
that's it. Great.
I think it's in progress. Doesn't make progress.
Appreciate it.
I mean, I've got it another item, but
Okay.
are you talking about specific projects? Or are talking about like projects in general?
No, projects like the best project or like in the bike park, but those projects that are being proposed or considered.
God, what's different?
I wrote down timeline from staff of things coming up. So like doing part of the agenda
Would you be directing staff to like, what would you be
to
directing?
present us with calendar/list of the things that are going to be coming up, say for the next 3 to 6 months. Any major projects that we're going to be hearing and deciding, any substantial issues that are going to impact the agenda. I mean, I don't know of any projects that are happening right now. Mandy, is there new stuff getting going or?
Not on my radar right now.
So, but yeah, I think that would help us with some of our agenda
Okay.
forecasting.
Any other future agenda items? Before we close it off and move to public. Does public wish to add any future agenda items? Julie, go ahead.
I just want to concur with Elise. This could really, that last one that you did, Elise, where we kind of have the timeline, that's something we could add in conjuncture with the council planning. So we're kind of getting two eggs with like one stone. Like we could do that planning and use it in a way it's giving the public that opportunity to be aware of stuff you guys might be planning around. And I also think like a survey thing, something to go around for town to kind of bring in those factors and let everybody just feel like they're aware and that those are topics of thought and discussion right now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone
Um,
else? Sorry, go ahead.
One more thing. I want to propose creating a transparency task force that involves council and community members. That would give people an opportunity to talk about what transparency looks like to them and and exactly what we could do differently that would improve that.
Future agenda.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
I lost my list.
I'll get you another one. We can compare.
So I'm at my personal.
All right. If we have no other future agenda items, I think we are.
Was the
Council correspondence. What was that?
one more future agenda?
Sure.
The whole agenda building process. I know I proposed that in early January and it got filed in the circular file. I'd like to repropose that and perhaps have us all chat about it in open session so that we might come up with something that we can all
What is
live
this
with.
doing?
In short, you want to discuss agenda setting process for the council?
Yes. Yeah, like Monday we do this, Tuesday we do this, Wednesday we do this, Thursday we do that, Friday we publish the
Agenda
agenda.
Yeah.
Christopher, you've not been on the agenda setting committee yet. I want to extend another invitation if you lost. The two council members set the agenda. You haven't.
I don't even know what that entails.
Okay.
We meet at a certain time.
We just basically collab and kind of come listen to anything and look at the agenda and say, if you remember me. Okay.
But thank you.
Yeah, no, I just, want to, I reach out. Okay. All right, well, if we have no other future agenda items, do we have council correspondence?
We have a letter from Jean.
Okay, great. I think I saw it.
Yes.
If we don't have anything to talk about, we can go ahead and adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Go First, and
3 seconds.
first from Pat, second from
Everyone.
everyone, and all those in favor of adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Very good.
Oh, my